Hey everybody, it's good to see you back once again. We're going to put the starting engine on today. That's right. Finally going to get that done. You can see I've started loading some of the base studs in place. We have the 3 done over here, and I still have to do 3 over here. But, well, before I can put the other 3 base studs into the bell housing, I have to address this detail item first. It's a really cool first generation piece. With 1113 being such an early tractor, it could have been eliminated through the years, but it was still in place. So it goes right in that open hole right there. And it's just an oil cup with some piping that is meant to carry oil to the pinion and ring gear where they mesh, lubricate, all that stuff. And I'll show you in the manuals I have laid out on the bench here. Early Caterpillar D2, 3J1, 5J1, and up operator's manual right here. We have the full lubrication chart fold out. We have the overhead view of the machine. We want to look at item number 7, which is starter pinion. You can see that small little oil cup right there, maybe just at the base of the starting engine. It says, fill oil cup with crankcase lubricating oil every 10 hours. So that is the piece in question right here. What makes that such a cool piece to still have now, though, is when we go into the later Caterpillar D2 U-Series Operator's Manual, they don't even have an hour interval for it in here because, well, we just have a brief note, starter pinion. You can see we're adding oil to that little cup with the piping and everything down there. And it just says, earlier engines are equipped with oil cups. Experience with later engines without oil cups shows that lubrication is not essential at this point. Where cup is provided, no lubrication is required and can be removed and a plug installed in its place. So, do you think for a minute I'm going to just eliminate this with a pipe plug? No. We're keeping that in place, but at the same time, I'm also not going to be adding any oil to it because, well, we have the clutch in the flywheel in the same compartment, all the dust being generated from that, and to make a long story short, they learned that having all that oil on all those gear teeth just made more debris stick to them, and those gears ran dirtier with oil on them and wore out faster than if they would have just left them dry. So yeah, we're going to let them run dry, of course, but we need to have something there too. And everything was moving along great until I went to clean it out, and I opened the cap just a little too far, and because that spring is rusty, it broke. So now that cap just flops. Oh, darn it. Of course, it was really rusty and poor condition, so it's best that it breaks now. We can do something about it. So, all right. So, we'll do what any other rational person would do. Bust into our new old stock stash. Might have to dig down a little bit, find it. Nope. Not in there. Not in there. There we go. See if we can find a new one. Yeah. Dremel off the peened over end of the pin. Pull it out. Get the spring. Do the same to the old one. There's part of the spring. There's the other half. Old cap back on the old cup. Drop the spring in place. Compress it. And because you were careful with the Dremel, you've got just enough of the old pen left to reuse again. There, peeing the end of it over so it can't drift out. Return triumphantly to the bell housing. Start the threads. Achieve final position and verify the auto closing nature of the cap with patina still intact. As I said, like any other rational person would do, right? I mean, we worked harder to save this. All right, now that we don't have to spin this around and around anymore, I got the other 3 base studs put in. And guys, Squatch is going to get a little bit preachy right here, but you definitely want to chase these threads on the studs, on the nuts that go onto them. Anything that has to do, well, I chase threads for everything anyway, but anything that has to do, especially with these starting engine bases, good clean threads is a must, because once you get this set on there, you're going to be working underneath the cylinders and the water jackets, and having this first generation oil cup with piping and everything that I'm so proud of, that's going to even further lock me out of this one for access. And you just really want to, I mean, taps and dies are not that expensive, and they can make life so much easier. So what happens a lot of times, and I've seen people struggle with it, you'll get a scenario like this where, you know, these things are old and rusty and the nut will stay on the stud. And when you go to loosen this, working in underneath here, the stud will turn out of the bell housing, but the nut and everything is on it. And because it's so tight under here, it'll stay captured in the bolt hole and you can't get it out. And I've actually seen guys clean the whole base and everything and leave that in there, and then when they set this back down, they're trying to start those coarse threads back into the bell housing, and then they're fighting everything. Just take the time to get that rusted nut off the stud, even if you got to cut the stud to get it out, and start over with fresh, better hardware. I'm telling you guys, it's going to save you time and save you hassle in the long run. And like I said, taps and dies are just such an essential part of the toolkit when working on these old machines, because when you have good clean threads, and you're going to see once I set that on, it's going to be real tough to get to this one. It's going to be tough to get to all 3 of those. All I need to do is start that nut, and then I can just go zing, zing, zing with like a fingertip, and it'll walk all the way down those threads until it hits the lock washer. And the only time I need to put a wrench on it is to compress the lock washer and get it tight against that base. So I got my rant out of the way. Gasket time. You all are familiar with the top water outlet seal. We covered that last time. I did buy a new base gasket from Cat, even though I could have made it, and I can't even pick it up. Look at that. So anyhow, this is the new base gasket right here. Part number's a 2A3483. Okay, everybody, get ready for some entertainment value here, because, okay, I've got the gasket in place. I've got goop on it because it's really heartbreaking when you have a coolant leak from that base. You just don't want to have to mess with any of that. So we've got that done. I also back up that rubber seal up here at the water outlet with some sealer as well. But when I set the starting engine on, I'm here by myself. I don't have any help. So it's sometimes if you stack that idler gear tooth for tooth on top of the pinion clutch drum, pinion drive drum in here, then you have some trouble until you can get in here like with your leg and actually like rotate that a little bit to get the mesh right, to get it to drop down. And then once it's on, I'll kick it back a little bit and then get that rubber seal put in there. Got a putty knife here for some help just in case. This is the only vantage point you're going to get of this, because it's just one of those jobs. And I really just want to guide that drain tube down right so we don't break it. Look at that, idler gear meshed up on the first try. Now we fight that water seal. If you want to lend some moral support, you can say some bad words for me. I won't hold it against you. Okay. Is that in? It's so hard to tell when these are popped in. I think it's in the groove. I mean, it's looking good all the way around. Yep, we're doing it. All right, I'll give you a better view of what I was looking at up here. I'm like 73% sure that's in where it needs to be. So yeah, got the most difficult nut started down here way back in the corner. That's what I was telling you about. So hear that? Boom, against the lock washer. That easy. That's why you clean threads. The rest of the hardware is up here. Everything else is fairly simple after you get done with that one. Easiest one of the whole batch right here. And then we have this longer bolt goes right here. And the one that's most often overlooked, that one that goes all the way back in back there. I'll cheat and use a magnet since I am holding the camera with one hand. There we go. Lock washer down. Nut started. Run down. Lock washer. Start the nut, come on. I should just work from out here. It's going to block the camera view, but it's a little bit easier to reach. Some people really don't like these. Personally, I don't mind them at all because you're talking to a guy that knows what it's like to remove the cab of a truck from the chassis just to be able to work on the engine. So there's not much on these old D2s that bothers me at all. All right, third and final. Not too bad. Boom. All right, off camera, I got all of the base nuts and bolts tightened down. Tools of the trade right there. A swivel socket with a long extension is pretty much a must for that one way back there. So we should be all well and good with that. Next up, I'm going to put the flywheel on. And yeah, it sticks down quite a ways, but luckily Cat had the foresight to cut a relief in that bell housing flange so that it will clear the flywheel as the transmission is going up to the engine. So that's good. Flywheel sitting over here. We have the Woodruff key, the nut, and thanks to Floor and Tractor, that's a new 3B4897 fold-over lock for that flywheel nut. And as long as I have both of the puller holes cleaned out, threads chased, everything's in good condition, we're going to cork those because otherwise there's going to be dirt and mud and everything else is going to end up in those, and we're going to have to clean them out again someday. Anyhow, once again, yet my favorite online store, McMaster-Carr. I've got to the point where I buy these corks in packs of 100 at a time, all different sizes. I've found that that's about 30% of the cost of me going to my local hardware store and cleaning out their bin, because I always buy way more corks than the average person. And then they're like, oh, we'll have some more next week. So then I come back next week and then we're all good because you use a lot of them. I mean, there's going to be 16 threaded holes I'm going to have to plug in all of these track roller caps. I also end up corking like this opening here where that dowel hole is, where the retention cup is, just to keep dirt and everything from getting. When you go through Caterpillars, you use a lot of corks, and 100 of one size sounds like a lot. They actually don't take you very far. I got the key in place on the crankshaft. Don't worry a bit that the flywheel is more yellow than the engine, because when the dash is on, the flywheel is all you see anyhow. Folding the lock now, this is a pretty simple one. There's a flat on the pulley hub up here. You just bend the upper portion of the lock down onto that flat and then just pick any one of the 6 sides of the nut to fold up onto from there. Okay, flywheel's on, permanent. So the last thing on the list for today is an assortment of compression, release, and throttle pivot linkages. So we'll get all this stuff together, and then we'll finally have a clean bench, and I can replace this really dirty cardboard. This stuff's been on here for so long, it's starting to get nasty, but I've had 3 engines and on here for months and months. So looking forward to a fresh start. All right, just getting a little bit of lubrication on some of the pivot points here. So first thing I'm going to do is assemble this throttle pivot lever onto the bracket. It just pins on. Cotter pinned in place. Yep, pivots well. So next we take the lever with the rod and slide it into the bracket. There we are. And we pick 2 of these bolts and go over to the engine. The rod goes between the starting engine and diesel engine, and the bracket bolts to the starting engine block right about there. And these bolts get sealant on the threads because these are open holes into the valve compartments of the starting engine. So these early 4B blocks are like that. The later 5F blocks, those are blind holes. So you don't have to worry so much about sealing those threads. There, everything's just hand tight for now until we get the other side secured. On the other side now, we put the bracket on this end of the rod. And again, sealer on the bolt threads. Now with everything in line and the rod pivoting smoothly, we can tighten the 4 bolts. Next, this tiny little woodruff key goes into a slot on the bottom of the rod. Now this small lever goes on. It helps a lot to spread that a little bit with a wedge. I've got a large screwdriver acting as a wedge right now. That's also why we put the woodruff key in down there. That locates it. And we'll secure it in place with the pinch bolt. And finally, pin it up to the rest of the compression release linkage. Back to the other side, final piece now. We'll attempt the one-handed trick shot here because I decided I didn't want to mess with that pole to put the camera on. All right, line it in for the throttle linkage. Boom, we'll put the cotter pin in later because I can't do that with one hand for sure, but that's doing what it needs to. So test out the compression release. We're in the run position right now, so to open those intake valves, we'll move the lever up to start. We have the spring-loaded plunger on there, so watch what happens to the linkage on the other side when I move this to start. And back to run. That moves very well. Let's just take a second to admire it. That's right, starting engine is in place. So I like how it looks on there. And so far I like how everything is fitting and working. Speaking of fitting and working, here's another instance. Well, I should say I got the new petcock in there for that air vent. And yeah, that's excellent fit. And another reason though why you do want to locate this properly is because now that you can see some of this throttle governor linkage is in place, we'll just put the rod up here that goes up to the throttle lever and roughly put put that where, there we are. You can see where that has to pass through this area of the top cover right there. So we definitely need to nestle that air bleed back behind these flanges enough that it's not going to impede that throttle linkage. So yeah, that's just part of getting everything placed where it needs to be. And when you do modifications, just try and do them properly. So, oh, one other thing too, I mentioned I got that new one. I also ordered 2 of the spout style spigots for the cylinder drains here. The trouble with this one on this side though, they're not going to fit, because when you raise this starting pinion lever all the way up, that spout is going to hit it. So yeah, it's too bad too, because I got them right here. Got them from Flywheel Supply, highly recommended. So yeah, there they are. Really good quality too, but trouble was they just don't fit. So, oh well, you win some, you lose some. Anyhow, all right, we made some progress, but remember everybody, I know some of you are getting antsy to hear this stuff run, but this is another whole engine subsystem in itself, and we've got a lot of studs up here that still have to have things put onto them yet. So yeah, we've got exhaust, we've got magneto, we've got engine breather, we've got carburetor, we've got governor, we've got all the control linkages. We need to sort the dash and the fuel tank to feed the carburetor. There's a long ways left to go before we can wrap rope on that flywheel. But once again, everybody, thanks for watching. We are getting closer, there's no doubt about it. And I'm going to roll into probably governor and crankcase breather next, and then carburetor, magneto, or magneto carburetor, either or. They both have to be done, right? So make no mistake though, we are inching closer and closer to that line all the time. So hope to see y'all back.